Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Carol, may we have roll call, please?
Bill Schleter. Here. Kathy McCoy. Tweed Schuman.
Here.
Troy Morgan. Here. James Schlender. Here. Mark Helwig. Here. Thomas Duffy. Here. Bruce Paulson. Here. Brian Bizinet. Elaine Nyberg. Here. Jim Bassett. Here. Ron Kinsley. Here. Ron Buckholz. Present. Helen Dennis.
Thank you, Carol. Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Carol, certification of compliance with open meetings law, please.
This meeting has been noticed to the members of this board, to the public, and to the news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you, Carol. All right, the meeting agenda has been set. Moving on then to number 4, public comments. If you are here to speak on an agenda item, you may speak at that time of the agenda item. If you are here to speak on something that is not on the agenda, we'll hear you at this time. Please state your name.
My name is Dean Michaels. I just want to make a quick comment concerning the rezone consideration 19 dash.
Sir, we'll hear you at that time then, okay? We have a rezone agenda item, so I'll hear you then.
You'll hear
You
me
don't
then?
mind?
Okay.
Is there anyone else? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to number 5, minutes from our previous meeting, 8/15/19. Mr. Kinsley? Mr. Buckholz?
A second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes as presented. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number 6, Land, Water, Forest Resource Committee. Mr. Paulson?
Yeah, I'd like to make a few comments before Greg comes up to give us the details about the user fee summary. In August, the committee approved option 3 in your packet. That's about it. Greg?
Okay, you have before you the proposal summary, as well as a listing of the 3 options that we came up with when we took a look at our event user fee. It's been the same for probably 10 years or more. So we took a look at it, see if we could revamp it a little bit. And as Bruce mentioned, we had 3 options that we looked at. The first one was based on entry fee. Second one was based on number of entrants. And the third option that we came up with, we had a meeting with stakeholder groups that would be involved or affected by this change to the fee. And the consensus was at that point that if we did go ahead with changing this, that the flat fee for all events increasing to $1.50 with Berkey included. I have to say that the stakeholder group was really not in favor of it, but this was probably the most reasonable of the 3 options that we had. So I guess if you have any questions about the proposal, the summary, otherwise I can go through it.
Greg, so the main difference then is the price on each of these options, or?
Yep.
I know you chose option 3.
Yeah,
$50.
yeah, the first one was based on the entry fee where we'd have a sliding scale, that there'd be a higher fee with the higher entry fee. The second was based on the number of entrants. So then we came up with the third option.
Kathy?
Yes, I guess I would like to address the issue kind of in general. First off, I want to say that all these events are wonderful events. They bring people to our area, they bring money to our area. The county gets additional sales tax revenue. They're a good thing, there's no doubt about it. But I also want to point out that these events and more people coming to our area put increased demands upon the county's infrastructure, on our roads, our law enforcement, our EMT services. We have been under a levy limit for the last 10 years. So basically, we keep looking at how we're cutting services. And it's not a good combination. If you're trying to cut services because you don't have the money to pay for them, but you're also trying to get more people to come into the area, to use the area, because that's what you want. I mean, that's your economic model that you're using. So I think what we need to be looking at is a proposal that would be fair and equitable, that would be fair to all user groups, and that also would provide the county with some resources to at least maintain our highways and maintain our law enforcement and our EMT services. So if you look at, if we could just come up with a compromise somewhere where we could afford to pay one highway employee and perhaps one patrol officer out of the fees that we would collect from these events, it's a win-win for everybody. We need those people to plow our roads for the events to happen. We need the events to come to bring us money. So I guess that's one thing I'd like to address. The second thing I'd like to address is that one size does not fit all, okay? I crunched a bunch of numbers, forwards, backwards, sideways on this. If you charge $1.50 to all groups, so you have somebody who charges $40 for an event, and they're gonna pay 3.75%. You have somebody who charges $80, they're gonna pay 1.87%. You have somebody who charges $140, they're only gonna pay $1.07. It's a regressive tax against smaller entities, many of them who are nonprofits, who basically give that money back to our community. So you could level that out. If you looked at examples where, say, you charge $4 per $140, it'd be 2.8%. $1 per 40, 2.5. $2 per 80, 2.5. $3 per 120, 2.5. Everybody pays the same, basically. So I think that's something that needs to be addressed. The other thing is, I know nobody wants to pay more money, but everybody does want more services. When we have an event going on and it snows, everybody wants those roads plowed, and they want them plowed now so that people can get to these events. If I'm gonna pay $140 or $150 to ski or to bike in an event, if I have to pay an extra $3 or $4 more, that's not gonna keep me from participating in that event. This county board talked about an endorsed room tax for just that very reason. Because studies have shown, if you're gonna go somewhere and you're gonna stay, like I'm going out and I booked a house out in California and it's got a local fee, this fee, that fee, that's not gonna stop me from going and staying there. Charging a reasonable amount, and it's not even that much under my proposal, gives the county a little bit more money to continue to provide the services that are needed to sponsor these events. And I think it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the county, and it's a win for the groups, and it's a way to keep bringing more people in. So I'd actually like to make a motion to approve option 1 with the following changes. So if it would be under $40, the fee would be $1. If it was $40 to $80, the fee would be $2. 80 to 120 would be $3, and anything over 120 would be $4. There would be no exemptions to these fees either. So the Berkey would no longer be exempt, nor would any other user groups.
Mr. Duffy?
I have some comments to make, but you want to wait for that second?
I need to wait for a second, sir, and then I'll let you speak. Is there, Troy?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Option 1, can I have those real quick, Kathy? I know Carol and I are writing those down. Option You wanna go with option one, with $1? Yep, yep. Got it. Okay, Mr. Duffy.
Mr. Chairman, I think first of all, we have to make the distinction between those people who use the trail and thank you and go home, and those people who use the trail and contribute something back. Now, I'm addressing the American Birkebeiner. First of all, the Birkebeiner is the one who maintains the trail, cuts the grass in the summer, maintains and grooms the snow in the winter. They expend over $200,000 a year doing that. We have the finest trail perhaps in the world because the snow is so well groomed. Besides that, they maintain 6 cottages they've built along the trail to be used by anybody who uses the trail, hunters, bikers, skiers, whatever, includes a stove, a toilet, running water, and lights. And more importantly, and looking ahead, is that the Birkebeiners looked at what is going to challenge the Berkey that's going to be here in 5 years or 10 years. It's going to be the weather. So last year they made the big step of saying, we've got to have snow. We have to have artificial snow. So the first step was taken last year at a huge expense. But what did that entail? First of all, you have to find water. You can't get water from the ground, it's too warm. You have to have a pool. Then you have to have a long pipe to pump it to the guns. And then you'll be able to pump it out. And the plan is eventually to have snow on the trail. So we'll have snow and we'll have a Birkebeiner regardless of what the weather is. These are enormous costs. The Birkebeiner makes nothing on this thing of the race. They invest it all back in the trail. And to put them in the same category as somebody who uses the trail and goes home isn't fair. I wish rather than charge them $1.50, I wish we could give them $1.50. They do more for the county than even in looking at what the tax base is. Their motto has basically been good health through exercise. And they've sold that to skiers to the point where many of them have bought second homes here. And it's a huge increase in what our tax base is. So to compare the Birkebeiner with other events that just use the trail and leave isn't fair. We put back into that trail everything we make. And it isn't fair, besides that, to send the wrong message of saying we're going to tax you because of it. Lastly, that if we do that, Bayfield County is going to fall right behind and double it. So the Birkebeiner won't pay 1 fee, they'll pay 2 fees. So I think we have to think seriously before we adopt that plan.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Mr. Pop, I'd like to hear from you, please.
Thank you. I think that we all agree that outdoor recreation here drives, as you said, and would completely agree with that. And I don't necessarily agree or disagree with the proposals that we talked about. We understand that the cost to maintain these is high. The Berkey pays EMS, we pay the police, we pay when those services are needed, we actually pay for them. So when that happens, we aren't asking you to do those services for free. We do pay for them. But the other thing, I think, if we're talking about equitable here and expenses from the county side, one other thing to think about. The county invests almost $25,000, a half FTE, in supporting ATV and snowmobile trails. Now and I think that's great. I'm not here to fight that. I think that's fantastic that the money that comes from the state that you utilize to have to maintain those trails, it takes a half-time FTE rec forester to do that. So the county's paying a half-time FTE to do that. We're not asking anything for the silent sport trails. We don't get any dollars for mountain bikes and ski races and ski trails. Those events are the fundraisers that allow us to do that. So think about when we talk about trying to save money or different options, I think there's a couple different ways to maybe think about skinning that cat. And lastly, I think if there is a tax adopted, that's fine. To your point, we'll likely just pass it on. Sawyer County event tax and the entry form, absolutely no problem. But what I think we would also ask for is a way that if that is truly going to help support the trails to maintain them, then is there a mechanism within that funding to be able to ask for grants or ask for a way to say, hey, we need to repair this erosion spot or fix this trail or whatever that is, that if that money is raised, we could ask for that. So thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Okay, I have a motion. Yes, Mr. Slender.
So I've got a question because it seems like we have some really entrenched positions on this, and I know this has been brought up in the past, and so Mr. Pop, not to speak for you, even though you spoke for us. I would ask is, so you're saying that you would be okay with a user fee as long as you could have access to the user fee funds that are collected?
Yeah, and we talked about it as a user group, if the funds that are being collected could be utilized as a resource to repair the trail, like Campbell needs to, as a repair, or the Berkey's working on a trail project, if you could utilize those funds to help repair the resource that is being taxed, so to speak, by the user groups, if there's more skiers coming and the trails getting, or mountain bikers, that they're being access to writing for a grant to that money.
So then, and then if we don't do this user fee, are you still gonna ask for that support, or is the money for that, you're gonna be able to derive that on your own?
We're not at this point asking for any money. We're going to continue to utilize the events.
So if no fee is attached, then there's no request for assistance from the Birkebeiner toward the county board. But if a user fee is attached, then there would be a request for assistance for the utilization of the Birkebeiner Trail.
Mr. Bassett?
Well, I'm actually not done.
Yes, sir, sorry.
Mr. Duffy, your opposition is the idea, I'm assuming it's that you're opposing to this idea of this user tax being applied. So the argument that's being posed is that we have this trail that exists in Sawyer County. It's unique, it's very well groomed, it's well maintained, and it's a draw for people to come in. If we didn't have this trail at all, then we wouldn't have the drain on resources that would need to go maintain it. And so, what specific, are you afraid that if there's a tax put on here, people are not gonna use this trail?
No, I think it's sense along as when you have all the earns and profits and whole nations back to the trail. Why do you tax them? The question is, they're an asset to the community. Go out and say, you do all of this, but let me throw this back.
You turn your, yes. Could you, yeah, thank you.
Is at one time, the county gave the Birkebeiner money to groom it. And the Birkebeiners oftentimes then just said, why don't we let the county groom the trail? And you pay us nothing, or we'll pay you $1.50 per entry, and you groom the trail. It's expensive. I mean, I say we spent over $200,000 to groom it. They build the bridges. The bridge across the main street is over $200,000. In December, they're gonna have a bridge over 77. That's gonna cost over $200,000. I mean, it's money, 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 and it's all put back into the event. And Sawyer County, gains by this immensely, Jim.
My last question, Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield the floor. So, if it costs $200,000 to groom and maintain the Birkebeiner Trail, do we have anybody here from the Snowmobile Association or whatever other ATV trails that we have? Does it cost $200,000 to maintain those trails as well? And then after that, I relinquish.
Okay, Mr. Bassett?
Number one, I don't remember exactly, but I think Don Barotek at the Land and Water meeting said that they got $200,000 from the state, from the permit sticker you put on your machine. Through that process, they got like 200,000, so yeah, it is 200,000. I'm not gonna go into whether the Berkey should be charged or not, I'm not gonna go into that, but I do think whatever we do, I understand what Kathy's trying to do, that sliding scale and the amount of people, but the people who are in the third or fourth group are paying way more than the people in the first group, and people don't understand how and why. I think if we do it, we need a flat rate. A use of the trail for everybody the same cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Kathy?
I would just like to point out, we're talking about two different things. This is a event fee, okay? We already have a user fee that the county is charging people, and the Berkey is collecting all of that money, and they are keeping all that money. We signed a 10-year contract with the Berkey to give them the right to have that user fee for 10 years and 6 terms of 10 years afterwards. So they are collecting user fees on behalf of the county. I mean, it's a county user fee, so we have a user fee. This is a event fee, so I think we need to distinguish between those two things, and I think we need to be aware that they are getting money to maintain that trail through user fees right now. And I'm not saying they don't do great things. I think they've been fantastic. I'm delighted with all they've done. I'm just saying that there has to be some equity. There has to be some way for the county to absorb some of the additional costs that were occurring as a result of these events. And these are very nominal amounts. We're not taking this money out of the pockets of the Berkey or out of the pockets of the Fat Tire or out of the pockets of the Lions. These are what the participants are gonna be charged, because then, like Ben said, that's all that's gonna happen. It's gonna get passed on to the participants. And to your point, Jim, by making the fees I did, I made it equal for everybody, so that the people who have a lot of money aren't paying less, and the people who have a little bit of money are paying more. So that was the purpose, was to actually even up the fees. So I think it's not an unreasonable proposal. We're not trying to gouge anybody. I think it's just something that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have to be sure you recognize that user fees charged by the Brookminer, that's authorized by the county, are not paid by the county. Those are paid by skiers. I mean, the skiers themselves are paying this fee on themselves to help maintain the trail. And the user fee doesn't cover half the cost of maintaining the trail. And as far as benefit to the county is concerned, you can talk about extra costs, police costs. The Brookminer pays for those costs. They aren't donated. And the benefit from the county is the huge amount of people who come here, not only for the event, they come here year-round to train. And come fall time, every weekend, you can find 5, 6 buses parked at 00 because they know they can count on the trail because it's always well-groomed at the expense of the Brookminer. I mean, the benefit the county gets is huge compared to what, the Brookie gets.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Mr. Helwig.
Can I ask Supervisor McCoy a question? It's to clarify what you were talking about on, now, the monies did you say that you want to pay for trails? Or is it to pay, say, to recoup some monies for the, say, EMS or Sheriff's Department, something like that? Just want to
The monies
clarify.
that would be collected for the event fees would come to the county, and the county could use those monies then to plow our roads, pave our roads, try to keep up with our infrastructure demands. And I do realize they pay for their services, but there's still a lot of wear and tear on things that the county is paying for. The county provides a lot of services to the people that live here. And I'm really interested in trying to maintain those services, not only for the people who live here, but for the people who come to visit us too.
I just have a follow-up question on that. So, and Mr. Pop, he had said something about like possibly grants from that money, but that would that be possible from the way your plan is?
I can just respond that there was a lot of years that the Berkey was in trouble and they didn't have enough money. And the county came forward many, many years and gave the Berkey money so that they could continue to exist. The Berkey is not in a position where they need our money at this point. Quite the opposite. The county is in a position where we need their money. And so I guess I look at it as a neighborly thing. You know, we helped them for a lot of years. I would love for them to come and say, hey, we'd love to buy you a new ambulance. For all those years when we were floundering, we've got the resources now. And I'd be like, thank you, Ben, and I'd hug you and everything would be well, because it's community helping community. And that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Paulson.
Right now, the user fees go into the Resource Development Fund. So if Ms. McCoy is talking about generating revenues for other county activities, then the user fee would have to go into the general fund. And I think what Mr. Pop was saying is that if we raise the user fees, then he was asking for a mechanism to get the funds back out of the Resource Development Fund so that they could use them to repair the trails and do other maintenance.
Mr. Slender.
A question for Mr. Paulson. Are you making reference to a user fee or an event fee?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm making a reference to the event fee.
Event fee, not user fee?
Right.
So does the event fee go to the resource grant or whatever you're saying?
Yes, it does.
The user fee or the event fee?
Okay, clarify, would you for me, event fee or user fee?
I'm asking you, because, well, you're saying that there's a fee that goes to whatever fund, and I understand that. But what's being asked here is an event fee
Is the
versus a
event
user
fee.
fee?
Right.
That is what's on the
No,
floor.
this is
And
the event fee.
which one goes where? So if
The-
a user fee is collected, that goes to, I can't say,
The-
resource development, what's that called?
No, the event fee goes to the Resource Development Fund. The user fee that's collected by the Berkey goes back through, goes through the county to, and then reimburse the
We're
Berkey
not,
for
we're
its
not
costs.
considering a user fee from the Berkey.
No,
We're
correct.
considering
We're
an
on the
event
event.
fee
Yep.
for the use of county resources. Does the event fee go to the general fund, or does it go to whatever? Where does that go? Someone,
He just stated it goes to the
Yeah, the event
Resource
fee goes to the
Development,
Resource Development Fund.
Yeah.
It
does it go to?
does.
which is to the county.
Right.
Okay, I have a motion by Supervisor McCoy, second by Supervisor Morgan, for option one with edits, under $41, $40 to $80, $2, over $80, $3, and $80 to $120, $4. Correct? Okay, is there any further discussion? Mr. Schleter?
Yeah, I need some clarification here about where the event fee actually goes. Mr. Paulson, you said it definitely goes to the Resource Development Fund. Kathy, I think your intent was it would go to the general county. Where did you think it was going to go?
I personally think that event fee can go wherever we want it to go.
Okay,
I think Mr. Paulson is right. I think it has been going into the Resource Development Fund.
no, but the event fee has
But-
never existed.
No, the
user
event fee
fee-
has always existed. It's always existed at $1 per participant. The user fee is running through the Resource Development Fund too and getting paid back out to the Berkey. But the event fee, that money could go anywhere. And even if it goes to the Resource Development Fund, then we can change our policy, because I think that money needs to go into providing services for the county. And I guess to Mr. Paulson's point, we're gonna adopt something for the Carlson, dam here. That money's coming out of resource development, so it's going to the county to provide infrastructure. You know, that's infrastructure too. I mean, so, I think that's kind of a moot point, really, in the whole argument.
Okay, so I've got a motion on the floor, option one with edits, I'll call it. Already explained that.
I would
Is there
like to
any- Kathy?
request the roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, Carol will have a roll call vote, please.
Should we start with Jim Bassett? No. Ron Kinsley? Ron Buckholz?
Yes.
Ellen Dennis? Dale Schleter?
Yes.
Kathy McCoy? Yes. Clete Schumann?
Yes.
Roy Morgan?
Yes.
James Schlender?
Speak up, Jim.
Abstain.
Mark Helwig?
It's, gentlemen, it's hard
Point
to
of-
be involved in all the discussion, and you need to vote.
That's a decision not to participate in the vote. That's my right there.
I don't have an answer.
And I don't have enough information for me to make a decision on it. I've heard the arguments, I understand the merit. I've heard the arguments, and I understand their merits. I am defined on, I've had 6 minutes to review this.
Okay.
I'm abstaining from this.
Okay, Carol, continue, please.
Thomas Duffy? Bruce Paulson?
No.
Elaine Nyberg? Yes.
The count, Carol?
8 to 3.
Okay, motion carries.
Mr.
All right.
Chairman, just for clarification, did we approve the funds going to the general fund or the Resource Development Fund? That wasn't in the motion, or for clarification.
I'd like to make a subsequent motion that the funds go into the general fund and that the effective date is January 1st, 2020.
Supervisor Nyberg?
Great, thank you.
We have a motion, I'm just waiting for a second.
I'll second it.
Second by Dale. Okay, is there any further discussion on our motion that these entry fees go to the general fund? Second by Mr. Schleter. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on then to Mr. Paulson, letter B.
You've got a motion before you to set up an ad hoc committee to revise the 15-year forestry plan and the outdoor recreation plan. The intent is to have those plans revised by 2020. Setting up the ad hoc committee will be a start. We may or may not add more people to the ad hoc committee, but if we do, we'll come back for further approval.
Mr. Helwig?
I make a motion to approve the ad hoc committee.
Resolution. Ms. Supervisor Nyberg?
I second that motion.
Mr. Kathy?
Who exactly is the ad hoc committee? All it says in here is that, Greg Peterson, who is our forester administrator, and Ed Peters, who is,
Ed Peters is the former chairman of Loretto.
okay.
Draper, sorry.
So they are the two people that are identified, and they can appoint anybody that they
No,
want, or
no,
any
no,
number of
no.
people?
The appointments would have to come back through this board before they appointed. They're just getting started. Mr. Peters he's a retired professor from Nebraska. He did a lot of research and work in the fish studies and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kinsley?
How big an ad hoc committee we're gonna have here?
I think it says five members, Bruce?
No, at the outset, it's going to be two, and then we'll let these two gentlemen figure out what kind of a committee they need, what size committee they need. In the past, I refer to Mr. Bassett, but I think there were about 5 to 7 people on the ad hoc committee for the outdoor rec plan. Okay. Well, we hope to keep it to a smaller number.
I would hope. Okay, Mr. Kinsley?
I just wanna make sure that it gets clarified how many we're gonna have.
Mr. Bassett?
15 years ago, when this was done, we wanted a broad assortment of people who represented specific items to do with activities in our county forest, I guess is the best way of putting it. And there were 12 or 13, and I don't remember all of them. I remember we had a representative from the bear hunters. We had representatives from, Greg, you got that list of what the organizations that were represented. You have that list, right?
Yeah, and more recently, we redid the access plan, which is a chapter in the 15-year plan, and so we ended up with, I think it was 9 members, where we looked for a representative from each major user group to hash it out, so.
Okay, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm not trying to argue here, but personally, I think that we need a broad spectrum of people who use that forest, because that's basically what we're trying to draw up or rebuild or renew that 15-year forest plan.
I mean, it was a big group, but it was very manageable when we did the access plan, so.
So, Greg, you'll take that into account when we start selecting members?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Okay, I've got a motion by Supervisor Helwig, second by Supervisor Nyberg, to approve the resolution to establish an ad hoc committee to revise the 15-year forestry plan. Is there any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple
sir.
more comments on this committee. The committee approved a bid to repair and actually take out the Carlson Road Dam and install a box culvert. We'll get to that under the Finance Committee. And then the other item is the the committee heard a presentation about supporting a resolution for a bill before the House to tax, a carbon tax, and the committee, it was pretty complex, so the committee decided to postpone a decision until the next meeting, and we'll probably be talking about that again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Paulson. Okay, then, moving on to number 7, zoning committee. Mr. Buckholz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of September 19th, 2019, soil tests were 152, even with the last year. Sanitary is 218, down 5. Land use, 386, is up 63 from last year. September and October priorities is the new model floodplain adoption, comprehensive plan update and bid approval, and securing signed contracts for the Carlson Road dam replacement. Also, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to read this to the board members. The Sawyer County Zoning Committee is an official committee for the county that hears all the zoning public hearing matters. This year alone, the committee has heard 14 different rezones, 40 different conditional use permits, and several text ordinance amendments. It is important to recognize this committee's decision regarding matters that may become in front of the county board. If there's ever any question, the county board may certainly view the official file located in the zoning office or speak with the zoning administrator. Now, with that being said, the public hearings are held at the zoning committee. There shouldn't be no public hearings being held on zoning at the county board level. You guys should be able to get the same information that the zoning committee gets and read that information. Then you'll know where we're going with this, whether we approve or disapprove the rezones. If you are not getting them, then let somebody know and we will make sure that you get them. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Buckholz. Jay, you want to come up then with the first 7A? This is a resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First rezone that we have here for tonight is rezone 19013, Newman Trust, Park Government Lot 3, Lots 2 and 3. 1 acre and 1.52 acres split zone between C1, which is Commercial 1, and RR1, Residential Recreational 1. The request is for rezoning 1.68 acres of Lot 1 on the preliminary survey map attached in your packet, all to C1, and leave the remaining 0.86 acres of the Lot 2 of the preliminary survey map to RR1. The applicants are requesting to rezone Lot 1 of the preliminary map, and a portion of the existing lot is already zoned Commercial 1. This lot contains a boat storage warehouse pole building. With the proposed rezoning of C1, the new parcel would also include an existing garage, which the applicants would or could use for commercial or resort storage. The other intent of this rezone then with the preliminary survey map would give the applicants the ability to sell off Lot 2 of that said map. Because that parcel is still partially zoned commercial, you actually couldn't split that lot off as it stands right now. You'd have to have it all rezoned to residential. You do have the maps and the request in front of you. As per the zoning committee public hearing information, it was determined on that August 16th, 2019 meeting that the findings of facts for approval were listed as such that it would not be damaging to the rights of others or property values. It would not be detrimental to ecology, wildlife, wetlands, or shorelands. It would not create an air quality, water supply, or pollution problem. The town board was in favor of the application. They had stated that it would not be damaging to the rights of property values of others, and it would be compatible with the surrounding uses of the area. There were 16 opinion letters sent out, 8 were returned, and all were returned with no objections.
Mr. Bassett.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Jay.
I move to approve the Newman rezone. Excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Buckholz.
I second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Bassett, second by Supervisor Buckholz to approve the rezone case number 19013 Newman Trust. Mr. Slender.
Mr. Buckholz, I have a question regarding the conduct of the hearings and the information that's provided. I understand and I respect completely the delegated authority that our committees have to conduct business on behalf of the county board. I have a lot of faith in you as a chairman, and I also believe in the work that you do. And I had in the past raised questions about some of the decisions or some of the actions that were being presented for the county board. And I went to a zoning meeting, and I don't envy yours, and Mr. Chairman, don't ever put me on zoning, ever. But my question for you, Mr. Buckholz, is that if there's information that shows to the conduct of the person as they're going through the history of their allotment and how they conduct it, we have findings that there was no pollution, there was findings that there was no damage to the property. How extensive is the testimony and the information collected that you require in your deliberations?
Is this related to this rezone?
It's related to Mr. Buckholz's questions for my support. Right, and so I'm responding to that, and it's in support of the motion, so if you want my support going forward, I just need to know, and it's not, I don't mean to question it, I want to understand, because you're asking me to, on your word, take you going forward, and as an attorney, you're asking for my vote. And so, I believe you, and I trust you, but I need to know the extent of what your hearings and the manner that you collect these applications, because I have received information that sometimes not everything is presented, or we get this information and we have like this motion on the event fee, user fee. We get 6 minutes to decide, and if I'm not comfortable with it, that's not me not trusting your decision. It's me not having enough information for me to make a decision. And I'm asked to make a decision. It's not an ask to review your conduct or to review the conduct of the committee. And so that when I ask these questions, these are questions that I need to be satisfied, because I have a responsibility for whatever reason why I sit here. So if there's conduct, is the conduct looked at, or is that presented, or is there an opportunity for that conduct to be presented? Because what I hate to have is for someone to have an acre or a lot of land that they treat and cut all the trees down, and they destroy the water, and they destroy everything, and then they get a vote for something, and then they decide to discard this land. And it comes in front, but we only go back a year, or we only go back 5 years, but there's long-term damage. I'm a member of the tribe from here, and so I'm aware of, through teachings and through everything else, the conduct of how our land has been treated. And I want to make sure that that information is respected and taken into consideration. And if you tell me it is, I believe you. But that's the extent of what I need for my information for me to vote confidently in these matters that come up. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bassett?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, committee. I don't know about the other committees, but the zoning committee, and I don't know whether that's law of the land or what, but basically every word that's spoken when that committee's in session is tape recorded. And there are things that come up that don't, the county board, when they adopt or deny what the zoning committee has done, doesn't show. But the zoning department, at least they did in the past, would have no problem if there was questions about setting it up so that anybody on the county board could listen to the hearing tape, hear exactly what was being said, what was being questioned, and would at that point have a better understanding of what the zoning did and why they did it. I'm not saying it's a perfect world, and I understand it would take a person an hour or two out of their busy lives to do it. But this, I gotta compliment Chairman of Zoning. That was an interesting statement, but what he said was very truthful, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Bassett, second by Supervisor Buckholz to approve the rezone 19013 Newman Trust. Is there any further discussion?
I wanted to respond to Mr. Slender's, Supervisor Slender's thing, but did he help you out, Supervisor Slender? Who? Mr. Bassett?
No, you did.
Well, one other thing I want to say, when these cases come before us, we get a staff report. And in these staff reports, it tells us everything we need to know about this land that's coming before us. And also on there, there is the finding of facts on that staff report, and that's what we go off of. I think it's A-okay, we use it a lot, and that staff report is one of our main things that comes through the zoning. And that's how we act off them, on the staff reports.
Thank you, Mr. Buckles. Mr. Morgan.
And just one other thing, to what you say, Mr. Chairman. There are some difficult decisions. It's just not just, though, solely the findings of facts. Everything that we do is a matter of public record, and our findings, including legal considerations, including comprehensive plans, including all the other things that are, I know at the last meeting, I think at the full board meeting, we got a little bit into the weeds, only focusing on those 7 findings of facts and whether they were the correct ones or not. And I just want the whole board to understand that that's not the only pieces that we have to consider.
Thank you, Supervisor Barr. Okay, again, motion by Supervisor Bassett, second by Supervisor Buckholz to approve the rezone 19013 Newman Trust. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. All right, zoning number B, Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to give you a brief introduction on, with respect to this agenda item. Pursuant to your board rules, number 7, sub 13, you do have the power to reconsider a specific item under certain conditions. And the reason this matter is on your agenda very briefly is due to certain concerns that were raised by members of the public, both with respect to communications and with respect to questions on legal analysis. So from there, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction, and I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Supervisor Dennis.
I move to reconsider the Gary Meyer rezone petition as set forth on agenda item 7B.
Okay, motion to reconsider. Mr. Morgan?
I'll second.
Okay, motion and second. Now, I know there was, sir, you were gonna speak to this? Yep. Are we on your portion here? You had questions on this, sir, in zoning? You can give it. I didn't mean to cut you off earlier.
No, that's fine. My name is Dean Michaels. I do own 2 pieces of property that border Gary Meyer's property. I guess I am opposed to it being rezoned from forestry to residential. Mostly concerned about the number of people, traffic, mostly the noise it's going to bring to the neighborhood. I purchased my properties because of the type of land it was. The property was undeveloped, sort of secluded, very few people there, very few structures. That's what I like. That's why I bought a second piece there. I don't really want to end up next to basically a housing development or what I understand possibly a campground. The zoning committee decided it was spot zoning, which they decided wasn't legal because it didn't benefit enough people. They decided that it was zoned forestry, which matches neighboring property or closely matches other property that are also agricultural. I just want to say, I guess I really feel it's going to change the look and the feel of the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jay, did you want to say? Oh, Rebecca? Yes.
Just like to point out to the board that you have a motion to reconsider in front of you. It is appropriate for this gentleman to make his public comment, but I would encourage you to vote first on the reconsideration. And then if you, depending upon that vote, if you do decide to reconsider, then you may take additional public comments at that point in time. And just a reminder that if the reconsideration does move forward, where you would pick up is exactly where you left off at the August meeting. What you are reconsidering is that motion, the last motion that was made at that August meeting. And I'm happy to walk through that in more detail if you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Can you turn your light on, sir? Thank you.
Are you talking about the county board, or are you talking about zoning committee meeting? You lost me there.
County board,
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to bother you.
no problem.
Kathy?
I will be abstaining.
Right, thank you. Okay, I've got a motion, oh, and why are you abstaining? All right, I've got a motion by Supervisor Dennis, and a second by Supervisor Morgan for, reconsideration of the rezone. Is there any further discussion? Carol, may we have a roll call vote, please?
We'll start with Ron Kinsley. Ron Buckles.
Yes.
Ellen Dennis. Dale Schleter. Dewey Schuman.
Yes.
Troy Morgan.
Yes.
James Schlender. Mark Helwig. Thomas Duffy. Bruce Paulson. Elaine Nyberg. Jim Bassett.
Yes, ma'am.
Numbers, Carol?
10 to 2.
10 to 2, okay, motion carries for reconsideration. All right, then, I'll, yeah, Jay?
Would you like me to fill you back in, bring you back up to
Yeah,
speed with the
briefly,
staff
please,
report?
yeah.
Okay.
And
And
is
then-
Mr. Meyer in the audience too? Okay, I'll allow you after, Jay. Okay.
Again, this rezone request, or the, I guess the resolution that you would have back in front of you now under the reconsideration, would be rezoning the entire 70 acres of F1 to RR1. So that is forestry to residential recreational, to create residential single-family building lots. Purpose of this request is then to submit for a state subdivision plat. At this point, it was a proposed 27-lot subdivision. With the proposed rezone, the applicant would and could create these multiple lots. At a previous zoning committee held on May 17, 2019, it was urged, or it was at that time, the applicant was urged to reapply when non-permitted outhouses were brought back into compliance. In order to rehear this case, the zoning committee needed to make a motion then waiving the one-year refiling process, as stated in Section 8 of the Sawyer County Zoning Committee bylaws, due to circumstances involving this matter, included but not limiting him being urged to reapply. At the July 9th, the applicant had corrected his outhouses and privies. The zoning committee then reheard this case. With that being said, again, it was recommended for denial at the zoning committee department, and that the findings of facts in the matter really did not change. And one of my pages I forgot to print out here, and I apologize for that. But bringing you back up to speed, then again, you have the other maps in the packet that would be included. If Carol can bring back up the screen, or you can scroll through on your tablets there. But I can
Jay, so
certainly
the,
answer any other questions that you may
The
have.
zoning committee then voted to deny the rezone,
They
correct?
did, correct.
correct, Mr. Buckles? Okay,
At a motion of 3 to 2.
okay.
I had a question for
Yes,
our administrator.
yes.
Mr. Kozlowski, was there any explanation in terms of the town of Radisson's approval as to why they disregarded, and correct me if I'm wrong, their comprehensive land use plan it was adopted as mirroring Sawyer County's, is that correct?
That is correct. So the town of Radisson actually didn't adopt a comprehensive plan, but they would fall under the county's comprehensive plan.
Due to their lack of having one themselves?
Correct.
And was there any explanation in their decision as to why the rationale for them not following the county's comprehensive plan?
I would have to read the town's minutes, but in the approval that they had sent to us, all I have is motion for approval at the town board meeting.
Okay, now I got Mr. Meyer. Can you come forward, please, sir?
A month ago,
Can you state your name for us?
Gary Meyer, Radisson.
A month ago, my developer and I started this process with the county board after going through the zoning department twice. We were advised by the zoning department then before we came to the county board that your decision would be final and that our only recourse was to go through the Board of Appeals. Further, that we would have only 2 days to file the appeal. It would have to be on their desk the following Monday with a check for $500. We satisfied that demand, but we didn't have to go through the appeals process because the county board ruled in favor of the rezone. If something has happened that would justify this reconsideration, I'd like to hear it. I mean, if a sacred burial site has been discovered on the property or something like that, then I need to hear it. But if there isn't anything significant, I think the board should honor its previous decision. And I reserve my right to come up and speak again after I hear from the opposition, because I want to know what's on their plate.
Well, I'll decide that, Mr. Meyer, so.
All right.
Rebecca, do you mind to reply to that, please?
I'm sorry, Chairman, what did you ask? Reply to
About his
Mr. Meyer?
concern about our option to reconsider.
Oh, sure. Well, again, under your board rules, and also under Robert's Rules of Order, you have an option to reconsider a previous motion made, so long as a member of the prevailing majority of the previous vote makes that motion, which Supervisor Dennis did, and she was a member of that prevailing vote, and so it's appropriate for you to enter into this reconsideration. In terms of Mr. Meyer's question of what is new, I can speak to some of those points. If you have specific questions on any of those points, I'm happy to walk through them. There are a lot of different legal issues at play here. There's the procedural question that and the legal question that Ms. Zilmer raised regarding what the board's options were and whether the board acted within its jurisdiction at the last meeting. There was concerns of public comments in terms of whether public comments were appropriately distributed to board members and the timing of those public comments. There was questions, as was mentioned before, regarding spot zoning and questions regarding comprehensive plan and deviation therefrom. So again, there's lots of legal issues at play that I won't stand here and reiterate all of those for you unless you have specific questions. I'm happy to walk through any of those points.
Thank you. Mr. Bassett?
I have a question about the legalities of the trail we're gonna follow here.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the typical three options, okay it, deny it, send it back to the committee? Is that what's going on here?
You mean in terms of what
This board is gonna do right now?
Okay, this board can, stick with its old decision in terms of upholding the previous motion, which was to approve the rezoning request. Now, whether you have jurisdiction to do that is where Ms. Silver and I respectfully disagree. You can accept the recommendation of the zoning committee and deny the rezone petition, so Mr. Meyer would not get the rezone would not go through. You can send it back to the committee for additional analysis with direction. I believe you could also table this decision to a date certain. Mr. Meyer had posed that question to me, given he didn't have, he had a certain number of days to prepare for this, even though you are well within your jurisdiction from a timing standpoint to have this reconsideration. And, certainly if you have questions about that, tabling to a date certain, I can answer those.
Are you okay, Mr. Okay, Mr. Schlender?
Mr. Chairman, I have all sorts of questions and concerns, and what's being presented to me, as I understand it, is we have, 5 different issues that are not resolved. and that they can be resolved, or at least can be explained by council if we ask her. We have a motion to reconsider, which is the last motion that we had. And so I
And that
agree with
passed.
Mr. Bassett, and I guess I need clarification. What exactly are we doing today, right now?
Well, we just did a motion and it was approved to reconsider. So now the floor is open. Reconsider the motion we had made at last month's meeting.
What was the motion that was made at last month? Who was the motion maker, who was the motion second, and what was the motion pertaining to?
It's in our minutes.
I don't know.
I think it was, Mr. Kinsley made the motion. Thank you, Troy.
So if we don't have a motion, second motion on the floor, can you even reopen that motion?
We can. The reconsideration, and that is passed.
I guess my follow-up question would be is, are we established with Robert Rules as a binding, or is that a persuasive document in terms of how we conduct board meetings? Because that's a parliamentary motion. Robert's Rules is more of like a fact book that comes in support that speaks to it, but there's actually, like, Congress doesn't use Robert Rules. They use parliamentary procedure that's been adopted through statute. Are we bound then by Robert's Rules, or are we bound by a different doctrine?
Your board policies that were adopted by this board set forth certain parameters, one of which is the reconsideration possibility. If it's not addressed in the board rules, then it defers to the Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mr. Buckholz?
I just wanted to say, too, that this rezone case has been sent back to the zoning committee twice already. I don't believe we need to send it there again.
Okay, at this time, then, I would entertain a motion. We have four options
Wait,
here.
wait.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Okay, we're probably gonna say the same thing. So now that you have this you're in the process of reconsidering the previous motion, you technically already have a motion on the floor. And that motion, which was made by Supervisor Kinsley and seconded by Supervisor Voigt, was to approve the rezone request. So what the motion is on the floor is to approve the rezone request. And if you have questions about that request or the case itself, now would be the time to ask those questions, or, ask the legal questions, or if you have questions for Mr. Kozlowski, this is the context in which you would do it. So again, just to make sure everyone is on the same page, the motion that is now on the floor is to approve Mr. Meyer's rezone request.
Thank you.
Then how do we know that Mr. Voigt still supports this motion as it's presented? How do we know that?
You don't.
So if he no longer exists, then how does that motion have a second?
Okay, Rebecca, I guess I need your comment.
I'm sorry?
I need your comment, because Mr. Voigt is no longer a county board member.
Obviously, he was a board member at the time. And so that motion was duly made. And at this point in time, because you are revisiting that, you're revisiting it within the context in which it was originally made. So I don't think that I don't think the fact that Mr. Voigt is not here does not impact your ability to reconsider.
Thank you. Mr. Paulson?
So I guess we're going to revote, or we can revote on the original motion?
Correct.
Okay, that's the option we have.
That is where you are right now.
Yeah,
Very
so
good.
there is a motion on the floor then to approve the rezone request of Mr. Meyer.
Correct.
Kathy?
I'm just, and I'll say this and I'll surrender the floor for the rest of this discussion. I object to this motion being considered, because if we're going to go back in time, then how are we allowed to change our vote? And Mr. Voigt is not allowed to participate. And if his resignation is such that it's binding and legal, then how do we even have any standing to consider this at this current juncture? Because we have a motion to reconsider, but we don't have everyone present for that reconsideration. We can't go back in time. So I object, and I'll probably abstain from this whole thing too.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, oh, yes.
What you could do is with this motion on the floor, the maker of the motion, Mr. Kinsley, could request to withdraw that motion, and then you could have a new motion, which could be seconded, so then you're clear in terms of the procedural issues. That's one option. Yes.
I too am just very confused by the process here.
Sure.
I'm abstaining on the whole thing, but the whole process to me seems very muddled and very unclear. And I guess one of my things is, if we have the ability to reconsider a motion from a previous meeting, are we gonna be able to reconsider every motion from our previous meetings then?
If someone were to bring forth a reconsideration within the time frame, within the next meeting period, yes, that's what your board rules allow.
Mr. Chairman, a point
Yes,
of
Mr.
order.
Paulson, yes.
If somebody recuses himself from voting, is it permissible for them to make comments to the?
Correct, thank you, Bruce, yep. Yep, just a second, Mr. Buckholz?
Rebecca, I'm just trying to get this clear. If Mr. Kinsley or Supervisor Kinsley rescinds his motion, but we need somebody else out there to make a new motion to
To do something.
approve or disapprove, right?
Correct. That is one option for you.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Kinsley? Could you help us procedurally to?
I am not,
Sorry?
I'm sorry. I'm not entirely sure that either sending it back to committee or Mr. Kinsley withdrawing the motion under Robert's rules is allowed. I believe the only thing we can do is the up and down vote. Now, after that occurs, then I believe there could be a new motion. But I think our only two options are either to just vote on the original, unless you've seen something differently.
Rebecca?
Certainly, I can review the Roberts rules because your board policies do not address this issue. However, generally speaking, under Roberts rules, whenever you have a motion on the floor, the maker of the motion can withdraw that. And so I'm looking at this as we are literally going back in time to August 15th and having we're in that same scope of discussion. It takes it right back to where that motion left off.
Correct, but
Okay, Ms. Supervisor Morgan?
Yes, but it has to be the maker of the motion who withdraws.
except that normally a motion can only be withdrawn prior to the vote. That vote's already been taken. I mean, that part's, to me, a little murky. It-
Okay. Rebecca, under
Yes.
legal advice then, would you propose that we re-vote on this? Or that it would be cleaner to have Mr. Kinsley withdraw his motion and then we'll start over?
Not to speak for Mr. Kinsley again, but he did just indicate that he would not withdraw his motion, if that's correct.
Technically, there's a motion on the floor in the last county board meeting
To approve the rezone.
Rezone request, okay.
deny what the zoning committee.
Correct.
And that is legal advice, Rebecca, that we do right now?
Let's vote.
Okay. I need to let,
Let Tweed run the meeting.
yeah, thank you, folks, yep. Yes, ma'am, I didn't say. Yeah, I know, I'm gonna let you up right now, ma'am. Now,
Yes,
I should allow public comment now before we vote?
absolutely.
So, yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. If you have other questions, I'm happy to answer those. Or if you have questions for Mr. Kozlowski, he can answer those. But yes, Mr. Chairman, now that we've had the staff's presentation, I recommend you take public comments.
Take comments, yes?
Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, you have 3 minutes, okay?
I know, I've timed
Okay.
it. My dog is tired of hearing this. Okay. My name is Linda Hind, and I am from the town of Radisson. I do have copies of what I am going to speak about, and so if you would like to have copies of them. I also have a letter that was emailed to you from a neighbor. I wasn't sure how the board policy was, and so I do have copies of his letter. So if you are, I talked to Rebecca, and she said that, you know, if you are interested in having a copy of what I'm talking about or that letter. Okay, so here we go. When I first wrote this, I thought it was before the reconsideration, and so that's the way that my speech is written. At tonight's meeting, I'm speaking not only for our family, but also for other landowners. I hope that their letters and conversations with board members, as well as my spoken words, will show reasons why a motion to reconsider concerning the rezone of Gary's land is warranted. I'm going to focus on 3 reasons for support of reconsideration, and you will find in these reasons that they also do relate to, again with the vote, not accepting the rezone to residential. Numerous times at the last meeting, members of the board asked to clarify the motion. Even after voting, it was evident that the confusion remained. And I am hoping that this reconsideration will allow supervisors a chance to develop the facts and make any corrections. So let's look at the facts. There was a letter that was presented at the August board meeting. According to Gary Meyer at the May zoning committee hearing, he stated that his nephew purchased 60 acres of land from Gary and he can't afford the property. While I understand the significance of this couple composing a letter to support the rezone, I question whether the supervisors had an opportunity to read all of the responses. In June, 5 opinion forms were sent to neighboring landowners and 4 letters arrived at the zoning department, 3 with objections and 1 with no objection. I hope that this reconsideration will allow board members to read these messages and identify the concerns of the neighboring property owners. According to Wisconsin statutes, local rezoning is justifiable when the application is consistent with Sawyer County Comprehensive Plan. On page 8-38 of the Plan for Land Use, it states that the town of Radisson is not developing a comprehensive plan. And the town's definition for forest rural residential reads, this category is areas where the town has seen growth in residential development. If you look at map 51, which is the future land use for Radisson, in the appendix it's located, a large percent of the area on the east side of the river is forestry.
Ma'am, we're at 3 minutes.
Pardon?
Can you finish
Okay,
up
I'll
this?
wrap it
Yeah.
up then.
Okay.
Therefore, a statement was also made, let this man sell his property. No one is taking the right away from Gary. He can sell his land. It can be sold as 70 acres. He can also divide the property into the 10 5 acres. The development company has proposed creating 22 lots along the shore and marketing to campers. This is an action of density spot zoning. It will only benefit the neighbor. And I'm almost done here. The fact that the applicant wants to develop a specific piece of property may not be enough to justify a zone change. Converting from forestry to residential property is not consistent with the county's comprehensive plan of protecting its forestry resources for the citizens and is damaging to the right of the current landowners who brought their property with the intent of living within forestry. I have one more comment. My third and final reason for requesting reconsideration is the possibility that there was a conflict of interest and an ethical violation according to Wisconsin Legislature 15.59.
Thank you. Okay, is there any? Yes, ma'am.
I'll leave if anybody wants to look
Thank
at
you.
those.
Linda Zilmer, Edgewater property owner. I have been attending zoning public hearings for, I think, 15 years now. I attended both the public hearings where this matter was heard, and I can speak to the earlier questions about how much information was collected, and I observed the reading of the record. I observed the zoning committee members giving due consideration to the public comments that were made, which unless you listen to the recording, you would not know. But you can see the letters in the file. And I believe that the first time, if it was in May, when the zoning committee found their findings of fact after looking at all the information and hearing the testimony and everything else, that they were justified in their findings of fact supporting denial. There are some other legal issues, but I also, in the second time that they heard this matter, I believe a proper public hearing was held. They considered all the facts, they listened to what people had to say, and they made a decision for denial to not rezone. And as Attorney Roker mentioned before, we do disagree that when that you were not presented with an amendment for a rezone, you were presented with a report for denial. At that point, you could have either, if you agreed with it, affirmed that denial, or it should have gone back to the zoning committee with recommendation. The zoning committee is, this whole process is established in state statutes under 5969. I believe that it was followed. And before you do vote, please clarify your understanding of how you vote. That if you vote a yes, I believe that is to affirm your decision and to rezone the property. And if you vote no, it is to support the zoning committee's decision for denial. Is that correct?
That is
Thank you.
correct.
And I
Thank
think
you,
this,
Linda.
the committee did its work, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Supervisor Dent.
I just had some comments to make. The reason that I moved to reconsider is because I, for one, did not know the facts. After the county board meeting, I did do my own research. I listened to people, and I do apologize to the zoning committee. I personally feel I should never have gone against what you did, because you do your research, you do your work, and it wasn't until after the meeting that I came up with the same conclusion that the zoning committee did. So I would just like to apologize to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Dennis. Supervisor Morgan.
Could I just ask Administrator Kozlowski to confirm the number of letters, the number of objections, where those properties were located?
Sure, yep. Yep, so there were 6 opinion letters sent out, and these opinion letters go to everyone within 300 feet of the property boundary. So there are larger chunks of land in there, so again, only 6 are legally sent out. 4 of those letters were returned. 1 had no objections, 3 had objections. There was also another correspondent letter that was given to the County Board of Supervisors, I believe the day before the last county board meeting. That was not distributed by myself or my office. But I can speak a little bit more if you're wondering as to
No,
where
not
the
at all.
location of those
But now
properties
this
are.
last letter that we got right before the last full county board meeting,
Mhm.
to my knowledge, because I was at both of those zoning meetings, that letter was not present for the evidence presented to the zoning board, correct? I
That
just
is
want to make sure that's
That
right.
is correct, and that individual that had sent that letter was not within that 300-foot boundary from the property subject to the rezone request.
Mr. Schluter.
Yeah, I have a question about the spot zoning. In the past, I learned, or I thought I learned, that it was not necessarily illegal, that it could be used. But I have heard recently that spot zoning for the purpose of a single individual's benefit is not legal. Could our attorney explain this to me, please? I mean, if it's not, if this is spot zoning and it's not legal, then this becomes a moot question. Is that correct?
The lawyer answer, sort of. There are both state and national treatises that say spot zoning is probably the most difficult land use issue for a deciding body. So unfortunately, there's no clear, bright line test, which we lawyers love. So the theory of spot zoning, you're correct when you articulated that. It is, you look to, it's a prohibition against a practice whereby a single lot or area is granted privileges which are not granted or extended to the other land in the vicinity in the same use district. However, case law has changed in recent history that says spot zoning is not per se illegal. So if there is a determination that, yes, this looks like spot zoning, if there are other considerations that you feel support a rezone for the health, welfare, and safety of the county, you can still approve that rezone request. So even though facts may establish that it is spot zoning, that does not mean you automatically have to say, nope, we can't rezone this. I know that spot zoning was another issue and question of discussion. If you'd like me to give some more information beyond that, I'm happy to.
Mr. Slender.
So I have a question. Sorry, Mr. Buckholz, Mr. Hoff, or Mr. Schuman. We've heard now 5 separate issues that has drawn this issue to why it should be reconsidered. Has there been anything filed? And then to your, somewhat to your analysis, is there any court precedent for Sawyer County to follow in terms of a rezoning designation? Because that would be the first thing that anybody would do in terms of what is the county's precedent. But I'm concerned because, and it's not about the merit, because I'm still gonna stand by my confusion, on the onset. But I have a procedural issue here, because if someone comes in and says, well, I think it's illegal, we should reconsider, then how are we gonna have any kind of process or any kind of finality for people who bring their issues before us? There has to be something. And it's not that I don't believe, the staff, because I have tremendous faith in our court staff, in our staff here, our county staff. But where is the proof? When you come in this courtroom, when you come before a board, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And so if we have allegations, just because there's allegations doesn't mean that we have a right to reopen this. And if you're gonna have something that's been substantiated, where is that information for us to reconsider that? Because we gotta protect this process, because otherwise someone can come in here next week and say, well, you know what, they didn't hear this. And so now we gotta come back and go through this again. I mean, we're already, 2 hours on this, and we're not even halfway through our agenda. And that's not my fault.
Thank you, Mr. Okay, Mr. Kinsley. Just a second, Jim.
He also abstained.
Mr. Kinsley?
Yes. Just like to remind people that Mr. Myers called me the day after the last meeting and said, tell me how that vote went. So I explained to him the vote went 7-6. And I believe he probably moved forward and started spending money to do this. Now, who's going to reimburse him if we change our vote today?
Rebecca? Thank you.
A very good question, Supervisor Kinsley. The law states that one does not have a vested interest in your zoning designation. If a property owner applies for a building permit that complies with all of the requirements, at that point in time, a trigger can occur where someone may be entitled to reimbursement for funds. It's my understanding from speaking with Mr. Kozlowski that that hasn't happened. So the trigger point of Mr. Meyer being able to be compensated has not yet occurred.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Sure.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Mr. I'm sorry.
Comprehensive plan that the town of Radisson follows is Sawyer County's. How many boards, how many different that they know that the comprehensive plan stands as the Sawyer counties. That can't be answered. But I can tell you that the town board may not be up on the comprehensive plan. I know this gentleman's paid his taxes, he has land he would like to sell. He's followed the rules. Let him move forward with what he has planned. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the rezone. Carol, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Start with Ronald Buckles.
No.
Helen Dennis. Dale Schrader. Kathy McCoy.
She abstains.
Reed Schumann.
No.
Roy Morgan. James Schlender. Mark Howard. Tom Duffy. Bruce Paulson. Elaine Nyberg. Jim Bassett. Ron Kinsley.
Okay, motion fails. So the rezone is not approved. Rebecca, do we need to move on now, or what's our next?
So
Yeah.
what you just voted for was the motion to approve Mr. Meyer's request.
And that failed.
No. I'm sorry, yes, the motion, correct.
So do we need another motion, or do we move on?
You can move on, or you can make another motion. To deny the rezone request and act consistently with what the zoning committee's recommendation was.
Mr. Buckholz?
I'll make that motion to deny the rezone request pertaining to the zoning committee's facts and findings.
Supervisor Dennis?
I'll second that.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to deny the rezone request. Any further discussion? Mr. Kinsley?
So, I'm sure that the zoning committee did the best they could do. But I'd like to know, doesn't the merit of what the town of Radisson, you asked the town of Radisson attorney, doesn't it create any merit that comes into the zoning? And that doesn't have to be answered, because we all can answer, okay? But I believe this gentleman needs the right to move forward with what he has planned.
Okay. Mr. Bassett?
You know, Ron, being on a town board, you got the responsibility of knowing what's going on within the town board. And your town board did the same thing the town of Coudray did. We laid back. Northwest Regional Planning came in and we did a map layout. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but it all refers back to a map, and they're zoned out. And zoning uses, I forget the name of that stupid plan. The,
Comprehensive plan?
yeah, we use that for part of our decision-making process. And if you knew what it said, you should have put in the comments that you send back about why the town board did what they did. Or ask for a moratorium and go in and change what your, whatever that, I'm kinda shook up here, I'm irritated.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett.
Yeah, whatever.
Do you have
Anyhow,
more?
no,
Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Supervisor Buckholz, second by Supervisor Dennis, to deny the rezone. Carol, may we have a roll call vote, please?
We'll start with Helen Dennis. Dale Schrader. Reed Schumann.
Yes.
Roy Morgan. James Schlender. Mark Howard.
Yes.
Tom Duffy. Bruce Paulson. Elaine Nyberg. Jim Bassett. Ron Kinsley.
Motion carries to deny the rezone. All right, moving on then to number 8, Public Safety Committee report. Mr. Kinsley. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
The main thing that I've carried away, two things I've carried forward. One is the resolution of rider from finance to have to support public safety. To support it. It regards the climate within the jail, deals with a quality of life for both our, not just the inmates who are been, have to do their time, but for the people who work there. And so, if there's any questions, we can definitely address it then. Second thing I asked for was a consideration for Mr. Voigt in his departure, if we could do like a certificate of appreciation or something for his time and service that he's done, both in public safety, but also on the county board. If that something could be considered, by this body, it would be appreciated by the committee. And then the last part is the resolution on the funding for the second judge. We delayed that for November so that we could have some insight from the legislature in terms of where we're going. We did get some initial indication that there was going to be an additional, I think there's one additional DA that's going to be awarded or made available to Sawyer County if they're able to hire. The one thing I asked Mr. Hoff, and the committee hasn't had a chance to fully flesh this out, but we need to have a discussion as to what a referendum would be in terms of trying to raise money to pay for this endeavor. Going now to the next component on the agenda would be Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee. Who's going to be presenting the PowerPoint? Okay, well then we have that, and then other than that, we did our budget adjustment. We're doing well, and we just had the tribe just had recent elections, and they were able to appoint their representatives from the tribal side to the committee, and so the committee is actually doing really good, and there's been a positive impact. So, PowerPoint.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder and Chairman. My name is Lynn Fitch. I'm the current president of Sawyer County LCO EDC, and I'm hoping to bring you good news for your county. So if we go to the next slide. The EDC has pulled together partners to try to answer some of the issues revolving around our inmates. We know that's a population that seems to have a tendency to get back into the same situation they're at. We're trying to present some training programs. So what we did is pull together resources with Workforce Resource Center, Northwest WIB, LCO School, the CJCC, Diane McNamer. We presented this to Mr. Hoff and WITC. So what we're trying to do, we've got a Construction Foundation certificate that WITC has. We can contract that out. It's a mobile lab. We're prepared to bring that lab to the jail and do a full training for higher education where inmates, we can take up to 10 inmates at a time. Those inmates will be trained in construction foundations, including OSHA laws, CPR, math for blueprint reading, etc. Once they get done, we hope to help them get hired immediately. The Northwest WIB and Workforce Resource folks will be available at the courthouse or wherever folks are released to help get them into transition programs, meaning they will help them get hired. We have individuals now who are prepared to hire them. We've met with the members of the NABA, Area Builders Association, and they are willing to hire, as well as we're hoping that some of the tribal members will be hiring out at the construction site there. So what we have is a $24,000, $25,000 program. Not only in this program, but we pulled together other resources. We have a individual from the Workforce Resource who's in the jail now, presenting 8-week sessions on career to workforce program. She's done one series of training already. The inmates who were there who took her training found great benefit. They loved the program, and she found that she learned from them as well. So she's prepared to go back in there for another round in October. Once we get these 10 inmates trained, we are also looking at additional programs like introduction to computers. We know that there's some need there. We also know that we have some hospitality training. We're trying to bring the LCO and WITC together to provide additional training beyond what we have proposed here in the construction foundations. And what we have up there is the programs that we have going now, they will have transferable credits. So they're not just a training to get a job. If individuals want to go on to higher education, they will be transferable. You can flip the slide. We know that one single construction job brings about $90,000 back into the economy. The workforce resource piloted this program in, I think it was Dunn County. Yep, it's up there, Dunn County. 24 of 38 inmates got hired immediately after being released. 14 had to return to the county where they were originally charged, so they could not follow those, but they think that there's some pretty good results there as well. So all we're doing is bringing together new programming with existing programming, hoping that we can get some people who are finding ways to do something other than get back into the predicament that brought them into the jail in the first place. The good news is WITC has a grant. It's a Careers to Corrections grant, and we are hopefully using those monies to provide not only this training, but develop the additional computer training and the additional hospitality. Once this grant is done, we hope to continue to provide more programming in different areas, and hopefully that will help relieve some of the issues we have with the incarceration to begin with. So there's our list of partners. We know that the Real Career Workshop is working. Good benefits already. We're going to start in January. The classroom's going to be at the basement of the jail. Outside, we're going to be conducting the building of the facility. It has to be a facility large enough to, I would say, about a $5,000 building. We have one entity who's willing to pay and purchase the materials for a smaller building. So we're looking for either another small building purchaser or someone who is in need of a full-size building for about $5,000. So we hope that's good news.
Thank you, Lynn. Very good news.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right, moving on to number 9, Public Works Committee. Kinsley. Kathy? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I'd make a motion to approve that, but it needs to be corrected. We still have, the chemical used in here. It still has not been taken out of the documents we have.
The version you have does not have
In front of us, and that's on the website. So I'd make a motion to approve with the deletion of, the ability to apply chemicals for purposes of brush control, and it's also on the second page too, where it says chemically treat stumps.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, we've got a motion by Supervisor McCoy, seconded by Supervisor Colson, with edits, correct, Kathy? Carol, you have those edits? Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Letter B, Mr. Kinsley?
Letter B, Airport Management Agreement Discussion and Review. As all of you should know that we've been in discussion with the airport management out there since last February or March. Continuing to have discussions with them. We thought it was important to bring what we've accomplished so far to the board so that they could review that. And that's
You bet. Come forward, sir. State your name.
Again, if you don't remember me from last time, it's Derek Leslie. First off, I'd like to say that I'm very humbled coming here and seeing the process that happens here at these meetings. It's very heavy stuff. It's very important, and I appreciate the commitment all of you have made to this process, especially Public Works Committee and all the hundreds of hours and the people who have been involved in that process. I want to make sure that this full board knows that, you know, as we bring these documents forward, hopefully in the next month or two, the importance of these documents. We've heard some matters here tonight that affect individuals and certain people, but I think this full board needs to understand that these documents is going to set a precedence for the airport for the next potentially generation. And the airport as a society, as a part of our society, I wish we had somebody like Mr. Duffy who could speak so passionately about the airport. I'm only 30 years old, and it's hard to put the words together as efficiently as he can. But I would urge members of this committee, some of you have been on airport before who are here tonight. Some of you have graciously come to our board meetings to hear about the airport. If you have questions about these things, either ask them tonight. If you've read them, please read them, and or come to our board meeting next month if you have questions or concerns that you would like to address at committee.
Thank you, Derek.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Paulson.
Question of clarification. These documents are just presented for us to look at, and there'll be I guess, a motion at the next meeting or the November meeting?
That is correct, Mr. Paulson.
Okay, and just, I wouldn't be a chairman of the finance committee if I didn't ask this question, but is there an adverse financial impact of these, in these agreements? I think not, but I'd like somebody to tell me no.
I'd just like to comment, our goal all along has been to make the airport be self-supporting, basically. So that's what we're working toward.
Thank you, Kathy. Does that conclude your report?
We have letter E. Letter E is the airport extension. The contract that's presently there expires on November 1st, and we're afraid that deadline, because we have to come back in October, so we, at the Public Works Committee last Tuesday evening, we approved a 3-month extension, asked that the board make a decision.
Supervisor Dennis.
I make a motion to deny proposed extension agreement for the FBO agreement and the airport management agreement.
Okay, I currently have a motion on the floor to deny the airport management extension. Do I have a second? Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Bassett.
You know, I might be willing to second that motion, but I don't quite understand what's going on here.
No, but I need a second for discussion on Mr. Bassett. There's a motion on the floor to deny the airport management extension. Is there a second? If none, motion fails. Supervisor Helwig?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 3-month extension.
Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
Okay, got a motion by Supervisor Helwig, seconded by Supervisor Paulson to approve the 3-month airport management extension. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kinsley. Okay, Health and Human Services Board. Kathy?
Basically, we are having difficulties recruiting employees as our other departments, especially mental health counselors. And it's not just Sawyer County. Obviously, there's an opioid crisis out there and a lot of issues with drugs and mental health, and we're not the only county experiencing them. So there's an acute shortage of individuals to go around to address this problem. So that's the main issue. We're continuing to try to recruit so that we can continue to get people off of our wait list and get them into programs, so.
Thank you, Kathy.
I got a question.
Oh, yes. Mr. Buckles.
Supervisor McCoy, are we advertising for help for them areas? I guess I haven't really read the paper lately.
I guess actually Rose is the one who is our HR, so she's in charge of that, but I think she actively has been trying to recruit.
Okay.
But like she explained to us that this is everywhere now, and so therefore there is not enough people to go around.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Finance Committee, Supervisor Paulson, please.
Okay, I'll handle A through D, and I think Mr. Keefe is here to talk about the budget. The first two items, I think we need to take them individually, are grants that we've received, and we want to amend our budget to reflect the grants being received. So the hazardous mitigation grant resolution,
Supervisor McCoy?
I'll make a motion to approve the grant applicant, or to approve the resolution.
Okay, Mr. Kinsley? Okay, I've got a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Is that to increase the emergency government department budget? Am I reading that correctly, Mr. Paulson?
right, by the amount of the grant, so it's revenue
Hazard
neutral.
mitigation grant resolution, okay.
Right, so are we on the hazard mitigation grant? Again, same circumstance, we have a grant.
We are on letter A and I haven't voted yet.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
Looking for further discussion on this? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, sir, go on.
Next resolution is a hazmat grant resolution. Again, we've gotten a grant and we're just adjusting our budget. It's revenue neutral.
Mr. Helwig?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kinsley? Motion by Supervisor Helwig, seconded by Supervisor Kinsley to approve the hazmat grant resolution. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, the next item is the jail climate control resolution, as Mr. Schlinder referred to it. We are intending to take money out of the canteen fund to do the climate change, the climate work to air conditioning and so forth.
Mr. Schlender.
Motion to approve this resolution.
Mr. Buckholz.
I second that motion.
Motion by Supervisor Schlender, second by Supervisor Buckholz to approve the jail climate control resolution. Any further discussion? Mr. Bassett.
Yeah, God, I don't know what to think of this. There are people out there that wish they could have air conditioning and can't afford it. And we're gonna put air conditioning in a jail for our prisoners to be comfortable? They're there to be punished for whatever. I myself am rather frugal. I do have an air conditioner in my bedroom. But during the daytime, I'm gonna sweat with the best of them. But I honestly sitting here don't know how I'm gonna vote on this, but I don't believe it's a good idea to do it. I really don't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I gotta go with Supervisor Helwig first, please.
I worked in the jail for 7 years, and I can attest to the fact that it is unbearably hot in the jail during the summertime. So as a former jailer, I would say it's a necessity to be able to work in there.
You know there was no air conditioning when you applied for it.
Okay. Thank you. I gotta go with Supervisor Dennis.
Wow. It's not for
Just
the
seconds.
inmates, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, Mark.
This air conditioning, this climate control is not just for the prisoners. However, the prisoners, there seems to be more tension with the heat, which affects the jailers and the jail personnel. And they've had issues. If I understand, there have been cases where they've been taken to the hospital. So it's long overdue. Thank you.
Yes.
I would add on 2 points, well, 3 points. The first one is, regardless of someone being convicted of a crime or their incarceration, they're still entitled to basic rights. And just because they're incarcerated doesn't mean that they have any less standing for care or treatment than anybody else does. And I get that their conduct is detrimental, but they are paying their debt to society, and to insinuate that they're, somehow entitled to being treated even worse because they did this is unfair. Second is, this goes towards the climate for not just the staff, or not just for the inmates, it goes for the staff. And so when the temperature rises, especially during the summer, it creates an unsafe environment for both the employees that have to work there. It makes it difficult for them to want to work there. And then we have a staffing issue in terms of who wants to work there knowing that there's no air conditioning. And then it creates a double burden, because not only do the jailers have to come in and provide for security, but they also have less staff to rely on so that they can get relief. And the third one, I want Mr. Zufel to write in the Sawyer County record that we are addressing climate change at Sawyer County.
just gonna say that.
Thank you, okay. All right, I've got a motion and second on the, motion by Supervisor Slender, I forget who I had the second for, I'm sorry. Supervisor Buckholz, second by Supervisor Buckholz, to approve the jail climate control resolution. Any further discussion? Supervisor Dennis, did you have anything else?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, number D.
The next item is the Carlson Road Bridge project. I referred to it when I talked about land and water. We are going to be taking out the dam at Little Round Lake, that's Carlson Road, and inserting a box culvert. We set aside $105,000 in the budget process for the project cost. The low bid came in at $156,000. The Land and Water accepted the bid, subject to approval by the Finance Committee.
So the Finance Committee, what now, Bruce?
Well, the Finance Committee approved this resolution as well. The money would come out of the Resource Development Fund.
Supervisor McCoy.
I just wondered, have we looked at any grant funding for this? Because the last project that we did kind of in connection and similar with this was on McLean Road, where we removed the channel that was going underneath the road, and originally we were gonna pay, I don't know, $80,000 or something for it, and lo and behold, it found out there was grant money and the project was completely paid for. So this seems like something that I don't know, but this is the kind of thing that the DNR, they wanna get rid of dams. I mean, so I just am wondering, have we explored any other possibilities as far as funding for this?
Mr. Paulson.
I can speak a little bit to that. There is a DNR grant for dam repairs and dam maintenance. This year we have taken that grant for the Tiger Cat repair. We would not be able to take another grant for dam replacement for another 2 years. Right now, our DNR permit for the replacement of the Carlson Road Bridge expires spring of 2020. If we do not replace this now, this potentially would need, and if you're waiting for a grant opportunity, you're looking at another 2 years out, where there are other dams that are also in need of repairs as well. This potentially then opens back up the avenue for other potential lawsuits in the involvement of the Round Lake elevation. The time to do this dam replacement is now.
Supervisor Buckholz.
I make a motion to approve the Carlson Road Bridge project resolution.
Mr. Bassett.
Second, sir.
Okay, I've got a motion by Supervisor Buckholz, second by Supervisor Bassett, to approve the Carlson Road Bridge project resolution.
Discussion. I think Ms. McCoy may have a point. I think we will, if we approve the motion, it should be subject to searching for a grant, because there might be grants available.
Okay. Do you mind amending that to your motion, sir?
I'll just amend that, or add it to my motion, that, looking for grants that maybe could help fund this project.
Is your second hold on this? Okay, Kathy?
I was gonna just say, I, and no offense against Jay, I'll do a little research myself too, but this is a removal of a dam, which is a different animal than a repair of a dam. So I agree with Mr. Paulson. I think there may be something out there that we need to explore.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've currently got a motion on the floor and seconded to approve the Carlson Road Bridge project resolution and also seek grant funding where available. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, before we move to the budget, I'd just like to say that the Finance Committee has started a preliminary investigation of seeking a referendum to exceed the tax levy limit. We will continue our work once we put the 2020 budget to bed.
Thank you, sir. All right, 2020 budget discussion. Mike?
Good evening. So, Carol, did you pass out the reports, everybody?
I would. Let's take a 5-minute break. continue with your report, please.
Yep, okay. Everybody should have a packet, and I think Carol will have it up on the screen also. So this is just an update of what we presented last month with new information, new numbers. And I'm gonna move quickly, so, you know, if you got questions, certainly stop me, but otherwise, I'm just gonna keep moving. And as you go through these, the items that are highlighted in yellow are just kind of some points that you know, are kind of important. The blue highlights are some of the changes that have been made since the last month. And I also want to just touch base on health insurance. You know, we talked about, we got 10% built into the proposed budget. That still stands. We haven't resolved health insurance, so we're still working through that. And then the second judge courtroom costs, I think we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. Other than a couple little exceptions I'll touch on, there's nothing built into this budget for that either. So again, the first page is just kind of an overview of where we're going. Couple changes under the special purpose levy section. The item in blue, $1.6 million, that was a month ago, that was $1,665,000. The highway reduced the bridge aid request from, I think, $70,000 down to like $6,200. So that decreased about $63,000. The effect of that under total levy, I'm looking at the tax rate on the very bottom right, that 3.15. A month ago, that was $317 per thousand. So not a big jump, but the tax rate is going in the right direction there. Page 2 is a summary of where we're at. It's a summary of the levy request by all the different funds. When we looked at this a month ago, we were in the position of needing to cut $910,000 to meet our levy requirements. When I did this report, we had that down to $500,000. And after today, I can update that right now, we have that number down to about $435,000. So we're whittling away, but we still got some work to go. And then down below, the special purpose levy requested, those two items in yellow really should be in blue. Those are two adjustments, the $4,500 and the $58,000. Those are special purpose adjustments. So questions on that? Nope, I'm gonna move on. Page 3 is just a summary of the changes that we've made. The line across about the third of the way down, that dark line, the items above that line were adjustments that were made up to the August County Board meeting. The adjustments below that line are adjustments we've made to the budget since that last County Board meeting. This page, though, does not reflect the adjustments that we made today. Yeah, I think it was let me go back. It was about $64,000 today that we. Well, we're at 435 now. Yep.
Mr.
No,
Chairman, can we ask questions as we go?
Yeah.
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
I see that we've taken $100,000 out of contingency. Do we still have something set aside for employee raises?
Yes. So contingency right now is set at $250,000. That's $50,000 for true contingency, $200,000 for employee compensation. Yep. All right, moving to page 4. This is one of the revenue funds in the general fund. The 3 items in highlight are the ones that we kind of focus on quite a bit. So far, we've made an adjustment to the sales tax income. We did increase the budget there by $100,000. That is in line with, if you've seen UW Extension usually comes out with their estimate. That came out, I think, within the last week. That's about what their estimate is. Stumpage, we'll probably revisit that yet, but we're hearing from Greg from Forestry that markets seem a little bit soft right now, so I'm not sure what we're gonna do there yet. And fund balance, well, at some point, we'll look at applying some fund balance to the budget.
So are you saying, Mike, that we may not hit our 1.7 forestry?
No, Greg thinks we're gonna hit it, but he doesn't think we're gonna exceed it by much. And he's a little cautious about looking forward to next year, not pumping that budget too much. What's that? Right. All right, I'm on page 5. This goes to Bruce's question. This just shows in yellow and then the blue contingency. We did reduce the contingency 100,000. So there's 250,000 still in that account. Shows some of the other accounts that are in this particular budget. Some of these we're going to touch on in a few pages back. All right, page 6.
Can I ask a
Yep.
question?
Yeah.
Yeah, health insurance, I'm sorry, you addressed that, and I apologize. Where are we at with health insurance right now?
So health insurance, we hired a consultant. The consultant has put the health insurance plan out to bid. I believe the bids were received last Friday. They're this week negotiating with the bids that were received. I don't believe we've heard anything yet.
And where have we parked that money for the proposed increase?
The 10% increase, I've got that built into every budget, every department. Yep. Yep. All right, so page 6 is the full-time equivalents. It shows what was in the 2019 budget, the changes that are being proposed at this point, and then what the requested 2020 budget would be. Just looking at clerk of court, increasing their FTEs by a 0.6 position. Right now, there's a position in that department that is a 0.4 position. That person is going to be retiring here soon, and the department head is requesting that with the changes to the district attorney's office, anticipating, additional workloads to bring that to a full-time position. So increasing about a 0.6 in that particular department. The district attorney's office, there is in that budget an additional secretary, judicial, legal, whatever, secretary, I guess the term is. You probably all heard that there was a press release put out this week that they are going to get an additional assistant district attorney in the district attorney's office. So there will be 3 attorneys when they're fully staffed. And this will bring the staffing up to 2.4 support staff for the 3 attorneys. The land conservation zoning, that's just moving somebody around. It's a net 0. And then down in human services, there's an increase of 2.5 positions. That's reflective of, I believe, the resolutions that were in front of you last month. So that's the FTEs. Page 7. Yep.
Yes. So, and this question is for Mr. Keith and Mr. Hoff. You're dealing with a budget deficit. We're going to be dealing with a budget deficit probably for next year. At what point at what point during the discussion are we talking about reduction of FTEs as a budget tool? When does that happen?
Well, I think it's related to the services provided. So as we look at the level of services that we provide in each area and the people that it takes to perform those services, they go hand in hand. So, the other piece of the budget that we, started this year was to try and provide more information about, not just the numbers in a department, but the services provided in those departments so that the board can have a better grasp of the services provided and is that the level that you want to provide. So does that get to your question? Okay.
The other thing I should maybe point out is, you know, not all of these positions are funded by levy. A lot of these positions, and I'm talking all positions now, but are a lot of times grant funded or partially grant funded. And the changes that we're identifying here, you know, the clerk of court addition would be a levy funded position. The district attorney position would be a levy funded position. 2 of the 2.5 human services positions are funded by other sources. Okay, page 7, if there's no questions, this is the EMS levy. Nothing has changed here since August. So unless there's questions, I'm going to move on. Page 8 is the requested capital improvements for 2020. I did make a couple of changes that I should note. First one being the very first item at the top left, fund balance beginning of the year. I did make a transfer from the general fund to capital as per what was in the budget. We budgeted 500,000, but I transferred 320,000 to hopefully eliminate the beginning deficit that we had. Then summarizes the expenditures, the revenues. I don't think anything really changed there. I did under transfers, I'm showing here for next year, we need to make about another $204,000 transfer. At least that's how we're budgeting it at this point, from the general fund to capital to kind of make the capital whole. Now I know if you look at the bottom line, it says fund balance end of the year, there's a $214,000 deficit. But that deficit is really being covered from fund balance accounts in other funds. So the next section down where it says fund balance applied, if you're looking at the screen, it's that very bottom section I'm looking at right now. It says less canteen fund balance, 55,000, less resource development fund. So there's other funds, fund balance that we're using to cover the 214,000. 200,000 in addition to that is coming from the general fund. And we did talk last month about, you know, are we getting to that point where we need to consider borrowing for some of this capital item stuff, or should we be doing these fund balance transfers? We did take this to the finance committee meeting, and I think most of us felt that at least for this year, we'd like to try and maybe use fund balance and not have to get in the situation of borrowing for the 2020 budget. So we're trying to make it work under that scenario.
And Mike, when you borrow for these capital projects or improvements, that money then falls outside of the levy limits? Is that true?
Outside of the levy limits, yes, yes. Still requires a county board vote, but it's outside the levy limits.
It does not require a referendum.
Correct.
Oh, Elaine?
Yep. Yeah, so each year you budget for the debt repayment, and that's the amount that would be outside of the levy limit each year, whatever that payment is. Correct? Yes. Okay. Page 9. There was a request to include in the packets some history on library payments. So there's 5 years worth of comparable information on all of the library payments we have that we're making. There's a column that's titled levy, and the first item says not exempt and everything else says exempt. What that means is not exempt means it's within the levy limit. Exempt means it's outside of the levy limit. So the NWLS is Northern Waters Library Service. That's outside of, or that's within the levy limits. All the other library payments we make are outside of the levy limits. State statutes. Okay, page 10 is a list of the outside organizations. Again, I'm just providing it for comparison reasons. I believe these will be coming to the Finance Committee for discussion, further discussion next time around. At this point, in the budget is what the requests were. Nothing has changed yet.
So nobody's requesting less?
No. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a economic tourism type entity. They do marketing. Maybe, I don't know, can we put you on the spot?
Yeah, there you go, Sherry.
Sherry would like to answer that question. She can do better than I can.
ITVEC used to be a joke about 5 years ago, but we used to pay 10,000. Do you remember that? And now we only pay 3. And we make great strides. We work 13 counties together. We have a wonderful website. We have an ATV snowmobile map that goes all 13 counties. You can get from Rusk to any county you want. And we also have a silent sports piece that we send out. So I think you get your money's worth.
And that's, Sherry, that's part of Northwest Regional Planning? What they meet?
No.
But they meet with.
It's with the Wisconsin Counties Association.
Okay,
No.
that's what it is.
No, we don't have anything to do with Northwest Regional Planning. Wisconsin Counties Association. And that's why the county has to pay it, because it's a county-funded project. Yes.
And also, when we were checking out a few things, I know we discussed this at the last committee meeting, I believe, as well, but they're also have a relationship with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, and if the state legislature gives money to the WEDC for distribution for various and sundry economic initiatives, those have to go through ITBEC, which means if we weren't a member of ITBEC, then we wouldn't be eligible for those grants.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so page 11 is just looking at what's our remaining timeline here on the budget process. October 17th is the administrator's budget presentation. And then the next row down, row down is the public hearing. We need to set a date. We can do that tonight if you like. You know, Tom and I, in talking, we're kind of looking at that last week of October, like October 29th or 30th, or maybe the following week, first week in November. We need a little bit of lead time here because we don't know how long this health insurance is gonna continue on with those discussions. And then I gotta have at least a 14-day budget notice that I gotta get in. So I guess we're just wondering, I think we're thinking a special meeting
For the public hearing.
for the public hearing.
Bruce?
I mean, you guys determine that, don't you, how your workflow is? So I guess I would prefer, rather than us telling you, you tell us.
Well, I think we're hoping for some discussion. Is there a night in that timeline that maybe works better for the group? Otherwise, we'd certainly set a time, but.
Supervisor Nyberg?
May I make a motion that we have a meeting on October 30th, Wednesday? Or the hearing, sorry, the hearing.
On October 30th?
Wednesday, October 30th,
That is a Wednesday, yeah.
Is that a Wednesday?
No. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's Kathy?
So I'm just gonna say, I'm bothered because we are basically doing the same exact thing that we have done for the last 4 years, 5 years, or whatever. We have not begun to talk about priorities yet. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. We haven't had one session where we've actually discussed what level of service we wanna have with our roads, what level of service we wanna have with our police, what level of service we wanna have in our zoning department. We have not addressed any of that at all. We're just kind of going through the motions. You guys are doing a great job. I'm not saying you guys, I'm saying we're doing a crappy job. You guys are doing a good job. So, we had talked about having some special meetings to discuss these things. Now we're already bumping into October. Is there any plan or any desire to do that still at this point, or are we just going to say, well, that's for next year again?
Well, I think
Supervisor, go ahead, Tom.
I actually kind of disagree with that. I think that, I think the committees have had intense discussions with Mr. Keefe, with Mr. Hoff about this, and it's been going on longer than just the budget discussion. We've been talking about positions and services. I mean, they even developed this point system, and I think that, I think we are doing our due diligence in providing that. I mean, we don't want to micromanage the directors or freak them out with an analysis of making them prove how important they are. We've done that, and we do that in the manner that's consistent with, you know, I agree a little bit with the past practices. Maybe it's not been as clear, but I think that the work that Mr. Keefe and Mr. Hoff have done to help bring the directors into the discussion in a manner that isn't undermining the authority of the directors or the services that are being provided. And so, yeah, so.
We've got a motion on the floor from Supervisor Nyberg for a special meeting for a public hearing on Wednesday, October 30th. Looking for a second.
I can't do that. I have a town board meeting that night.
Okay, so motion fails. Mr. Morgan?
On the 29th, also, we will have some absent members due to the Wisconsin Counties Association lobbying efforts down at the Capitol. And that does not end, I believe, until 4 or 5 o'clock. So we would be absent.
Again, Mr. Kinsley.
Can we have it on October 17th?
Well, the concern there is we'd have to publish almost by October 1st in the paper. And I don't know with health insurance when we're gonna get that resolved. I mean, because WCA is next week, so, you know. I mean, it could go, I mean, I think in the past, this board has done it on the November county board meeting. We're trying to avoid that, but it could be done.
Mr. Paulson, you had your light on?
That's Halloween.
It's a scary
It's
thing.
not a federal holiday, is it? It's not a federal or state holiday.
Mr. Slender.
I would ask that we consider the location as much as we do as the date and time. And if we need to break this into 2 parts so that the people in Winter and the people in Stone Lake and other ones have as fair an ability to participate as we do for the people in Hayward.
Supervisor Dennis.
Is there a problem with October 4th? Or, yeah, November 4th.
November 4th.
Can't do it, sorry.
See, it's not as easy as you.
No, it isn't.
Supervisor Nyberg, sorry.
Mike, we've exhausted your,
Well, we can pick a day, but the 7th, does that?
So what if it's October 31st? So what?
I make a motion to have a public hearing on November 7th.
Is that, what day of the week is that? Thursday? November 7th. Motion by Supervisor Nyberg for the special meeting public hearing on November 7th. Supervisor Dennis?
mean, that's getting just about as late as we can possibly get, so.
Second, Bruce? Okay. Okay, got a motion by Supervisor Nyberg, seconded by Supervisor Paulson to hold our public hearing special meeting on November 7th. 6:30. We're not. 6:30, and we'll hold it here, but
Is it gonna be here? I mean, does it have to be here?
yeah. 6:30, November 7th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
All right, Mike,
Any,
continue.
any other questions on the budget? If not, there was a handout, another handout for the potential judicial additions. You know, Tom, you want to touch on that, or?
Yeah, we did provide this information a couple of times to the full board, and we did talk about it again in finance last month, and we'll continue to talk about it as things progress with potential legislation that would allow a second circuit court in Sawyer County or not. So we keep these in front of you just to keep it in mind that would greatly affect the operating budget and our debt if we built a building. So we just want to make sure that we let you know the potential here. As we look at this piece of paper, you know, there is the additional judge section at the top, the additional district attorney section in the middle, and since we last met, as has been mentioned tonight, on Tuesday, there was a press release that Sawyer County is one of the counties that will get an additional assistant district attorney. And we haven't had a chance to talk to the DA yet on, you know, staffing needs. We've got it in the budget currently, but that's one of the things that we're still looking at as far as county-funded support staff in that office. And then with the venture architects providing dollars associated with the options that they presented for building, we projected out some debt service numbers, and as we talked about earlier, those debt service numbers, debt payments would fall outside the levy limit. So when we're talking about court costs, you know, we've got two components to that. We've got the capital costs, which would be debt funded, which would be debt payments outside the levy limits. And we would have operating costs, which would be general fund operating costs falling within the levy limit. So those costs up on the top, and those are estimates, you know, those are subject to discussion and change and whatever, but those are the numbers that we put out there for discussion purposes. So that's kind of where we're at. We're waiting to see what's happening. There's a potential bill winding its way through, and maybe you have other comments on that?
Unless you want me to, I can do it under the committee report.
Okay, that's fine, yep. Yeah, so anyway, so that's just, you know, as far as budgeting then, there's nothing in the budget for any of those numbers outside of the district attorney support cost, and that's still, you know, the discussion point that we're working through, so.
Okay,
Any other
thank you.
budget questions? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Paulson.
A question or two for Mr. Hoff. The 341,000 or 342,000, where's the money going to come from to pay for that? That needs to come out of general fund operating costs within the levy limit. So that, you know, getting back to the priorities, you know, that means that $341,000 of other things we're currently funding would not be able to be funded. Or we find other revenue sources or, you know, whatever, but that's gotta fit within the levy limits, yes.
Mr. Howick.
And this is for 2020 budget, no?
No, we're not including any changes for a Second Circuit Court within the 2020 budget. Any potential legislation that occurs on that, I don't think would affect the 2020 budget as far as operating costs, but we would certainly need to get moving on capital costs if we learn anything new there.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mike, for that presentation.
Mr.
Really
Chairman,
appreciate it.
just a question for Mr. Schlinder. Have you seen, I'm sure you've seen this study done by the Director of State Courts Office?
Yep.
Is your committee looking at that and
Oh,
looking?
I've seen it. We haven't brought it to the committee yet, and, but this is an ongoing discussion regarding funding and the issue, and I also am aware that members of this board, members of the county staff have been under a lot of pressure from a lot of representations that have been made. Some of them are accurate, some of them are positioning. And so I've talked with Mr. Hoff and what we can do to try to address that. If that report can be made available to the county or for the public safety meeting at the next meeting in October, I think that would be important.
Great, thank you.
The reason I'm bringing it up is that the report has recommendations that we use the court commissioner more extensively, that we expand the commissioner's role based upon state law, that we should look at maybe rescheduling how we do jury trials. There's 6 jury trials on average in the county. Could we take another look at how we schedule jury trials to make sure we have our courts packed, our courtrooms packed? So those are just some things I would like your committee or the committee to take a look at.
The committee has examined that at length. There has been major discussions. We have to be careful because if we, and I'll be brief about this, as brief as I can be, the idea of a court commissioner is it's the state ditching its responsibility and passing it on to the county, because where that fund comes from for those court commissioners comes from county funds. Same it does with public defenders, and same that it does. And so even though we're saying that we can't afford it, and then we're saying that we can't afford it, therefore we're gonna pay for the extra judges that will come in under a court commissioner fee separate from that. And it's you can't rob Peter to pay Paul to try to address the issue. So I would just caution, that report is, it's not a red herring, but it does not properly address the concerns that we have in terms of what the court loads in and what the considerations that have been provided for Sawyer County. And I say that from 2 perspectives. One, I say that as someone who's sat on this public committee, and we've kicked this every single different way that we can, but I also do this as a court commissioner. And so, I'm more than willing to come in, but you're gonna have to pay us to do this extra work, and you're not gonna be able to absolve that. I mean, where does that money come from off of the, is that within the levy limits for those court commissioners? You're not avoiding it, you're just trying to repackage it and put more lipstick on the pig, and the pig's still gonna be the pig.
Kathy?
I was just gonna say, if we're gonna start to talk about this issue, one of the biggest clogs in our system, the judge is a clog in our system, and I don't mean that in a mean way, it sounded bad, but public defenders. Most of the people that are sitting for extended periods of time in our jails are because we do not have public offenders to assign to them. We can't find public defenders. It's a problem statewide. And so that right now is the big clog at the beginning, not necessarily the clog at the end. And if we get a second judge, that's not gonna help, because if we don't have public defenders, we're not gonna move people through the system faster than we are now.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, Mr. Paulson.
Okay, just a couple of questions. I represent obviously Bass Lake, and my employers, well, I have to ask these questions on their behalf. One is, what's a second judge going to do for us? I mean, is it going to reduce the opioid epidemic? And I'm not looking for answers tonight, but I think we should be looking at this as and we've got Ms. McCoy's resolution. I hope that comes out pretty soon, and is the second judge going to reduce our crime rate? Those are answers that I think, at least I would like to have answered.
How far into this discussion are we gonna get?
We wanna keep this brief.
I'm just saying,
I've got a couple more things, Jim, but if you wanna say something?
I would say that the constitutional protections that we have as citizens are not measured in terms of defining it by the individuals. It's defended by the process that we have. And so the crime rate is by those who've been adjudicated. The opioid is not the fault of the second judge, and the second judge isn't gonna come in and clean up the opioid problem. And so that's unfairly shifting the burden and the blame to the court system, and the court system is doing its best to try to address these concerns, and a second judge is necessary in that regard. Funding it is another issue, and we have to figure out how to fund this. I mean, let's move on quickly.
Thank you, sir. Okay. All right, appreciate that. Thank you, Mike, Tom, for that budget information. Okay, moving on then to number 12, Economic Development, UW Extension. Mr.
Okay.
Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met on September 9th, had a short visit with Hayward Lakes Visitor Bureau. We talked about sports shows. They go to 11 sports shows. They have about 10,000 attendees at each show. And board members basically man the booths and donate their time. The Fair Board reported on the fair this summer. It went very well. The attendance was up about 10%, and hopefully the revenues will be up also. We won't know that till next month. Then John Saunders appeared on the Trail Committee. He informed us that the trail is complete on the hospital complex. They have approximately 6 miles of trails there. And further, that the Brookie Bridge over 77 will be completed in December. Then Mike reviewed with us the 2020 budget requests that are set forth in more detail on page 10 of his report. And that's kind of it what we had.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Mr. Morgan?
And just very quickly, under last correspondence reports, Dale, I'm sorry, Supers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Want to
oh.
add more for economic development, or?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were,
Oh, okay.
we were wrapped.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Okay, moving on, number 13, County Administrator's Report. Tom?
Okay, we've discussed a lot of things already. The budget, we went through that. LCO, County Child Support Services, we did have some meetings there where I have not heard that the judges have met. I think that was the next step in looking into that issue. Dam repairs is another issue we kind of touched on tonight, and finance is looking at possibly imposing special assessments. We're looking at every alternative revenue source that we can think of or that we have access to as we look at future budgets. So that's a topic that'll be coming up again. Trail fees, you did discuss that tonight. One thing that you may want to consider, the trail fees or the event fee that is put into place for 2020, the Berkeys already had registrations, and it will be difficult for them to recapture that revenue for that. So that's a potential issue that you may want to think about. Airport agreements, you have those in front of those. I encourage you to look through those, and if you've got questions on how those are put together or the direction that's going, it's important that we have good discussion about that next month. That'll be a topic for the next Public Works Committee again. They've been very diligent in working with us as we negotiate what we believe their intentions are and working towards resolving the final issues there and bring documents back that'll be before you for approval next month. Ambulance stations building, it's underway, and that's a good thing. We did have a conference call on the opioid litigation on Monday. There's been some changes there. You probably heard some things in the news. They caution us, that a lot of things in the news may not be the way things are going in the court, but we're keeping an eye on that. Yeah, I didn't say it. And then some of us will be attending the WCA conference next week, Monday, Tuesday, so.
Okay. Letter B, summary of changes to policy manual.
Yes, Rose has got in front of you some changes to the employee handbook, and I'll have her come up and explain if need be.
Actually, I've got them. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. I didn't realize.
The handbook was given to the administrative committee. We reviewed about 2 months ago, and it was approved to forward to the full board at this month's meeting. Admin only had one question. That was whether sick or vacation time had been earned by an employee could not be paid out to them if they left employment within the first year. Legal counsel advised us that as long as that is what our policy reads, then it's legal. So this would start with employees hired after the policy manual is approved. The change in accruals could have an economic cost, but only on employees that we would need to fill, like jail/dispatch and EMS. Worst case scenario would be around $14,000 a year. But would probably be less and could be offset by not paying out vacation time to an employee who leaves during the first year of employment. We fully expect this to be a working document. We know there will still need to be changes / adaptations and so forth, but we need to get this approved so we can continue on with our payroll automation project. Payroll automation, does that include supervisors? No, okay. Anyway, that is what Rose wanted me to pass on.
We do. So,
We need a motion to,
Mr. Kinsley. To approve the 2019 policy manual as presented. Supervisor Dennis?
I second that.
Okay. Motion and a second to approve the 2019 policy manual amendment. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Morgan.
Sorry. On the 29th of August, Supervisor Schlueter and I and a couple other staff members were able to meet with Representative Edming and Senator Petrowski relative to where the legislature stood on the Second Circuit Court judge. At that point in time, they let us know that the current bills that were then in the Senate and Assembly, which is Senate Bill 148, Assembly Bill 153, had very little chance of passing. Senator Petrowski at that time talked about another idea that would phase in judges over a 3-year period, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Originally, it thought it would be 4 judges, then 2, for a total of 8. I did just receive an email this afternoon from his chief of staff saying that the bill now is finalizing co-sponsors as of 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. It was just sent out to the legislators yesterday morning on the 18th. They've now upped it to 12 judges over 3 years. So 4 judges in 2020, 4 judges in 2021, and 4 judges in 2022. The requirements for that, that the county has passed a resolution supporting a Second Circuit Court judge, which this body has done. The second requirement is that the infrastructure to support, i.e. a building, is in place by May 31st of the year that the circuit would come into effect. So for instance, if we were approved for one of the 4 in 2022, we would have to make sure that we either had the facility or close to completed by May 31st of 2022. So that's cutting it pretty close even if we were to approve something like that tonight. So we're just trying to get the best information as county ambassadors that we can and keep you updated. I don't know if this is the proper format for that, or I can certainly forward the email that I received. It's public record, so I can certainly send it to the whole board if that's what they would desire. Okay.
Mr. Duffy?
Tom, what's the status of the Rasmussen lawsuit?
Status of what?
That
Rasmussen?
case has been dismissed from
easement.
federal court.
Okay, and what's the status of the easement then? Just nothing?
No changes.
Okay, okay.
Mr. Bassett?
I was invited to, excuse me, go to NRCS meeting at the Spooner DNR station. I forget the date, last week sometime. I was there. We had a brief overview of all of the programs that the NRCS offers as farmers in our county. And then we were given questionnaires to rate said programs and give it a number, and they are going to do this in all of the DNR regional offices around the state, and then compile the statistics, and then rearrange, if necessary, the point system for who gets what, and et cetera, on grading on the programming. And farmers get points if they have a good manure handling system. They get 50 points for that, and they add these points up to see who best qualifies for this other program. And that's basically what I did. And that's number one. And then number two, I see you talked to Rebecca Tweed, what are we gonna do about what happened here today with that?
We'll discuss it.
And shut up.
We'll
John.
meet it. No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
We'll be in discussion with legal. Thank you, Mr. Bassett. Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Chairman, is there an update on the posting or the filling of the position for Mr. Voigt? And what is the chairman's plan to address the vacancies on the committees upon which Mr. Voigt has served?
Okay, Carol and I and Tom put out or Carol actually did it. We put an ad in the paper, requesting letters of interest, and I think we have four. So I will, personally interview with them, and then I'll come back in October with a recommendation to the board to fill Mr. Voigt's position. Right now, I think I will seat that person on Mr. Voigt's current committees. That's the plan. Any other, I know Tribal Governing Board appointed Lorraine Gouget to our CJCC meeting, and I think, Jim, that's all I've got appointed thus far. Kathy?
Was there a deadline that people had to, like, send a letter of intent or interest?
There was, what was that?
I don't think so.
That's why concerned, because I didn't think there was, and so are we setting a deadline, and should we be letting the public know there is a deadline?
That's a good idea. I think we should discuss that.
Well, it stated that he would be, Tweed would be giving the recommendation at the
October.
So I mean, they've got to give the recommendation.
Oh, Mr. Buckles.
You're saying that, whoever you point to fill Mr. Voigt's vacancy, are they gonna come in and take over Mr. Voigt's positions in them committees?
That'll be in discussion, with Vice Chairman and I, on where we put them, but I know your concern in zoning.
I'm
I
concerned with
understand that,
zoning,
yep.
and also, like I say, if Mr. Morgan was our alternate, he was at every meeting. He's very well qualified, he's an asset to zoning, I'd like to see him on there as a committee member, and we would also, have to have an alternate.
Thank you. I will highly consider that. Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Chairman, I put in front of everybody, this is an entrepreneur training that is sponsored by the Economic Development along with the Small Business Development Corporation. It's going to start September 24th. So if anybody knows of somebody who wants to start a business, somebody who wants to buy a business or has any interest, there's a contact information at the bottom. Why don't you pass it along to them and encourage them to sign up?
Thank you.
I do not want to be considered for the zoning alternate.
Okay. Is there anything else for correspondence?
One more thing.
Yes, sir.
I just want to, invite all the county board members to the zoning meeting. I have a seat. Make room. You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Okay, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.